The crystal chandeliers cast brilliant light across the Boston Harbor Grand Ballroom as hundreds of wealthy donors mingled at the annual Children's Future Foundation Gala. Jackson Mitchell, tech entrepreneur worth over $50 million, stood near the dessert table adjusting his navy blue tuxedo. At 34, he had built his software company from nothing, but tonight felt different. Something felt wrong. The ornate cake before him looked perfect. 3 layers of vanilla sponge with white buttercream frosting, decorated with delicate sugar flowers. The caterer had assured him it was prepared specially for the evening's honored guests. Jackson picked up the silver fork, ready to take his first bite. "Sir, she put something in your cake." The small voice cut through the elegant chatter like a knife. Jackson looked down to see a tiny girl, maybe 8 years old, with tangled brown hair and dough-smudged cheeks. Her clothes were torn and too big for her small frame. How had she gotten past security into this exclusive event? "What did you say, sweetheart?" Jackson knelt down to her eye level, ignoring the curious stares from other guests. "The lady in the kitchen, she put powder in your cake. I saw her through the window. She wore gloves and looked around real careful before she did it." The little girl's green eyes were wide with fear but determined. "My name is Penny Wilson. I live in the alley behind this building with my grandmother Rose." Security guards approached quickly, their hands reaching for the child. "Sir, we're sorry about this interruption. We'll remove her immediately," one guard said. "Wait." Jackson held up his hand, studying Penny's serious expression. Something about her honesty struck him. "Which lady in the kitchen?" "The one with short red hair and a black dress under her apron. She kept looking at the door and checking her phone. When she thought nobody could see, she dumped white powder from a little bag into the frosting for your piece." Penny pointed directly at the slice Jackson had been about to eat. The ballroom grew quiet as nearby guests began listening. Jackson's business instincts, honed from years of reading people and situations, told him this child was telling the truth. He had enemies, business rivals who resented his success, former employees he had fired for dishonesty. "Call Detective Thompson from Boston PD," Jackson told the security chief. "And don't let anyone from the catering staff leave." Within minutes, Detective Claire Thompson arrived with the crime scene unit. A tall woman with short blonde hair and intelligent blue eyes, she had investigated corporate crimes for over 10 years. She immediately ordered the cake to be tested while questioning the staff. "The little girl was right," Detective Thompson announced 30 minutes later. The cake slice intended for Mr. Mitchell contained enough rat poison to kill 3 grown men. "We've arrested Martha Stevens, one of the catering assistants. Her phone records show contact with Ted Barnes, your business competitor." Jackson felt his knees weaken. Ted Barnes had been bidding against him for several major city development contracts. Just last month, Jackson's company had won the contract to build affordable housing in South Boston, beating Barnes' higher bid because Jackson promised better conditions for residents. The crowd murmured with shock and concern. Jackson looked down at Penny, who had stayed close to his side despite the chaos around them. This brave little girl had just saved his life, and she was homeless, living in an alley. "Are you hungry, Penny?" Jackson asked gently. She nodded, her stomach making a small rumbling sound that broke his heart. "Let me get you some real food. Nothing from the catering table tonight." Jackson smiled at her, feeling something shift in his chest. For years he had focused only on building his business, working 16-hour days, living alone in his downtown penthouse. He donated money to charities but never got personally involved. This moment felt like a turning point. Detective Thompson approached them. "Mr. Mitchell, we'll need your statement, but the immediate danger has passed. Barnes is being arrested as we speak." She looked down at Penny with kind eyes. "Young lady, you're a hero tonight. Your quick thinking probably saved a life." Penny blushed but stood straighter with pride. "Officer, what happens to Penny now?" Jackson asked, feeling protective of the child who had risked herself to warn him. "Social services will need to be called. If she's really living on the streets with her grandmother, they'll both need proper housing and care," Detective Thompson explained. "No," Penny said quickly, fear flashing in her eyes. "Please don't separate me from Grandma Rose. She's all I have left." Jackson's heart ached at the desperation in her voice. Here was a child who had saved his life, asking for the simple dignity of staying with her family. How could he do any less than help them? Detective Thompson, what if I provided housing for Penny and her grandmother? I have a guest house on my property. They could stay there while we figure out a more permanent solution. The detective raised her eyebrows. That's very generous, Mr. Mitchell, but there are procedures for this kind of situation. I understand, but surely keeping a family together is better than separating them into the system. Jackson looked down at Penny, whose eyes had filled with hopeful tears. What do you think, Penny? Would you and your grandmother like to come stay at my house for a while? Really? Penny's whole face lit up. You would do that for us? Sweetheart, you just saved my life. It's the least I can do. Do you think Jackson is making the right choice by taking in Penny and her grandmother? What would you do in his situation? Leave a comment below and subscribe to see how this incredible story unfolds. Jackson spent the next hour handling police statements and arrangements with social services. Detective Thompson helped navigate the legal requirements, impressed by Jackson's immediate commitment to helping Penny and Rose. The other gala guests watched with amazement as Boston's most successful young businessman transformed from a potential victim into a guardian angel for a homeless family. As the evening wound down, Jackson walked with Penny through the elegant ballroom toward the exit. The contrast was striking, his expensive tuxedo next to her torn clothes, but they moved together with mutual respect and growing trust. Mr. Jackson, Penny said softly as they walked. Why are you being so nice to us? Most people just walk past when they see homeless folks. Jackson stopped walking and knelt down to face her again. Penny, you risked yourself to save me tonight, even though you didn't know me. That takes incredible courage and kindness. If a little girl can be that generous to a stranger, then I should be able to help when I have the ability to make a difference. Grandma Rose taught me that we should always try to help people when we can, even if we don't have much ourselves. Your grandmother sounds like a very wise woman. I'm looking forward to meeting her. They walked out into the cool Boston evening air. Jackson's car was waiting, but first they needed to collect Rose from the alley behind the building. As they approached the narrow space between the hotel and an office building, Jackson saw a makeshift shelter constructed from cardboard and old blankets. Grandma Rose, it's me, Penny called softly. A woman in her 60s emerged from the shelter, moving slowly but with dignity. Despite her circumstances, Rose Wilson carried herself with grace. Her gray hair was clean and neatly braided, and her clothes, while worn, were tidy. Her blue eyes held both wariness and intelligence. Penny, child, what are you doing with this gentleman? Rose's voice held a slight southern accent, refined despite their current situation. Jackson extended his hand respectfully. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Jackson Mitchell. Your granddaughter just saved my life tonight, and I'd like to offer you both a safe place to stay. Rose studied his face carefully, years of experience helping her read people's true intentions. That's very kind, sir, but we don't take charity. We make our own way. Grandma, please, Penny pleaded. The man was going to be poisoned, and I warned him. Now he wants to help us. Isn't that what you always say about how good deeds come back to bless us? Jackson saw the internal struggle in Rose's eyes, pride fighting against her granddaughter's welfare and safety. He chose his words carefully. Mrs. Wilson, your granddaughter showed incredible courage and kindness tonight. She could have just walked past, but she chose to get involved and save someone's life. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering gratitude. You raise an extraordinary young lady, and I'd be honored to help provide a safe place while you get back on your feet. Rose looked between Jackson and Penny, then at their cold, unsafe shelter. Finally, she nodded slowly. We accept your generous offer, Mr. Mitchell. But this is temporary, and we'll find ways to contribute however we can. I wouldn't expect anything less, Jackson replied, meaning it completely. As they gathered Rose's few belongings, Jackson learned that she had been an elementary school teacher for 30 years before losing her home to medical bills after Penny's parents died in a car accident. She had been caring for Penny on the streets for 6 months, doing odd jobs and protecting her granddaughter with fierce determination. The drive to Jackson's home in Beacon Hill was quiet, both Rose and Penny staring out the windows at the well-lit streets and beautiful historic buildings. Jackson found himself seeing his city through their eyes, not just as a place of business opportunities, but as a community where people's lives intersected in unexpected ways. His house, a restored 1800s brownstone, looked warm and welcoming as they pulled into the driveway. The guest house in back was small but comfortable, with a bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, and living area. "This is beautiful," Rose whispered as Jackson showed them through the space. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," Jackson replied. "Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps, but tonight, you're both safe and warm." As he prepared to leave them to settle in, Penny grabbed his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I knew you were a good person the minute I saw you." Walking back to his main house, Jackson felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the deep satisfaction that comes from using your resources to genuinely help others. His near-death experience had shaken him, but Penny's courage and Rose's dignity had opened his heart in ways he never expected. The wealthy businessman who had started this evening focused only on profit margins and expansion plans was ending it as a man who had just gained family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, 3 lives had been forever changed by an act of unexpected kindness from a brave little girl who chose to speak up when it mattered most. Jackson woke the next morning in his spacious master bedroom, sunlight streaming through tall windows overlooking Boston Common. For the first time in months, he hadn't checked his phone before getting out of bed. Instead, his thoughts went immediately to Penny and Rose, wondering how they had slept in the guest house. He dressed in casual khakis and a light blue polo shirt, then walked across his back garden to check on his new house guests. The September morning was crisp and bright, with red and gold leaves just beginning to show on the maple trees lining his property. He knocked gently on the guest house door. "Good morning, it's Jackson." Rose opened the door, already dressed neatly in a clean blouse and skirt. Her gray hair was braided and pinned up, and despite everything they had been through, she looked dignified and composed. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell. I hope we didn't sleep too late. Penny and I aren't used to such comfortable beds." Rose's smile was genuine but reserved. "Please, call me Jackson. And you slept exactly as long as you needed to." He looked past her to see Penny at the small kitchen table, working on something with intense concentration. "What's she doing?" "Homework," Rose said with obvious pride. "Even living on the streets, I've made sure Penny keeps up with her education. I found old textbooks at the library, and we work on lessons every day." Jackson felt his respect for Rose grow even stronger. Despite their desperate circumstances, she had maintained her granddaughter's schooling and sense of normalcy. "Grandma Rose used to be a teacher," Penny called from the table without looking up. "She's really smart about everything." "I'm sure she is." Jackson smiled. "I was wondering if you'd both like to join me for breakfast. I called my housekeeper Mrs. Chen earlier, and she's preparing something special." Rose hesitated. "That's very kind, but we don't want to impose." "Mrs. Wilson, Rose, you're not imposing. You're my guests." Jackson's tone was gentle but firm. "Besides, I eat breakfast alone every morning in a dining room meant for 12 people. I'd enjoy the company." Penny looked up from her work hopefully. "Can we, Grandma Rose? I finished my math problems." Rose's resistance melted at her granddaughter's eager face. "All right, sweetheart. Let's go have breakfast with Mr. Jackson." They walked through Jackson's back garden to the main house. The kitchen was warm and inviting, filled with the smells of fresh coffee, bacon, and something sweet baking in the oven. Mrs. Chen, a kind woman in her 50s who had worked for Jackson for 3 years, was setting the breakfast table in the adjacent dining room. "Good morning," Mrs. Chen said warmly, immediately embracing Rose and Penny as if they were family. "I'm so happy to meet you both. Jackson told me about your brave granddaughter." The dining room table was set with Jackson's best china and crystal, but the atmosphere was comfortable rather than formal. Mrs. Chen had prepared scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, and homemade blueberry muffins that were still warm from the oven. "This is so much food," Penny whispered in wonder, her eyes wide at the feast before them. "Eat as much as you want, sweetheart," Jackson encouraged. Mrs. Chen loves cooking for people who appreciate good food. As they ate, Jackson learned more about their story. Rose had been widowed young and raised Penny's mother Linda as a single parent while teaching 4th grade in a small town outside Boston. Linda had become a nurse and married Tom Wilson, a construction worker. They had been killed by a drunk driver when Penny was 7. I sold everything to pay for the funerals and Linda's medical school loans, Rose explained quietly. Then I got sick, pneumonia that turned into something worse. The medical bills took the rest. By the time I recovered, we had nowhere to go. Why didn't you contact social services? Jackson asked gently. Rose's jaw tightened slightly. I tried. They wanted to put Penny in foster care while I got back on my feet. I couldn't let them separate us. She'd already lost her parents. I was all she had left. Jackson understood. Rose's fierce protectiveness of Penny reminded him of his own grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died in a plane crash when he was 12. Grandma Helen had fought for custody against distant relatives who saw him as a burden, and she had won by showing the courts that love and determination mattered more than financial resources. You made the right choice, Jackson said firmly. Families should stay together. After breakfast, Jackson made a phone call to Dr. Rebecca Hayes, a physician who volunteered at the Community Health Center, where Jackson's company had donated computers last year. He explained the situation and asked if she would examine Rose. Of course, Dr. Hayes said immediately. Bring them in this afternoon. I'll make sure Rose gets a complete checkup, and we should have Penny examined too. Living on the streets can expose children to health risks. Next, Jackson called his lawyer, Michael Brown, to discuss legal guardianship options and ensure everything was handled properly with social services. Jack, this is a big commitment, Michael warned. Are you sure you're ready for this? Mike, this little girl saved my life. Her grandmother is one of the strongest people I've ever met. I can't just write them a check and forget about them. They need stability and support, and I have the resources to help. All right, but we need to do this correctly. I'll contact Family Services and arrange a meeting with a social worker. You'll need to be approved as a temporary guardian, and Rose will need to consent to the arrangement. That afternoon, Jackson drove Rose and Penny to Dr. Hayes' clinic in his Mercedes SUV. The Community Health Center was in a neighborhood Jackson rarely visited, working-class families, small businesses, and older buildings that had seen better days. But the clinic itself was modern and welcoming, with bright colors and children's artwork on the walls. Dr. Rebecca Hayes met them in the waiting room, and Jackson felt something unexpected when she smiled. She was about his age, with shoulder-length auburn hair and warm brown eyes behind stylish glasses. She wore a white coat over a green dress that brought out the color of her eyes. You must be Rose and Penny, Dr. Hayes said, kneeling down to Penny's level. I'm Dr. Hayes, but you can call me Dr. Rebecca. Are you going to give us shots? Penny asked suspiciously. Dr. Rebecca laughed. Not today. I just want to make sure you're both healthy and strong. Jackson told me you're a very brave girl. The examinations took about an hour. Jackson waited in the lobby, finding himself hoping Dr. Rebecca would have good news about Rose's health. When they emerged, Dr. Rebecca gestured for Jackson to join them in her office. Rose is malnourished, but otherwise surprisingly healthy for someone who's been living rough for 6 months, Dr. Rebecca reported. Penny is a bit underweight but strong and resilient. However, Rose does need follow-up care for some chronic issues that will likely worsen by stress and poor living conditions. She handed Jackson a list of prescriptions and follow-up appointments. The medication isn't expensive, but Rose should see a cardiologist within the next few weeks. Her blood pressure is concerning. Whatever she needs, Jackson said immediately. Cost isn't an issue. Dr. Rebecca studied him curiously. This is very generous of you, Jackson. Not many people would take such responsibility for strangers. They're not strangers anymore, Jackson replied, surprised by his own certainty. They're family. That evening, after picking up Rose's prescriptions and buying Penny new clothes and school supplies, Jackson sat in his living room reviewing the paperwork from social services. Rose was helping Penny with her reading in the guest house, their voices carrying across the garden through the open windows. His phone rang. It was his business partner, Steve Martinez. Jack, what's this I'm hearing about you taking in some homeless people? Are you having some kind of midlife crisis? Jackson felt irritated by Steve's tone. I'm 34, Steve. And I'm helping a family that helped me. The little girl literally saved my life. Look, I get that you're grateful, but this could be a liability issue for the company. What if something goes wrong? What if they sue you later? Steve, you're talking about an 8-year-old girl and her grandmother who's a retired teacher. They are good people who fell on hard times. I'm just saying, maybe write them a check and help them find an apartment somewhere. You don't need to get personally involved. After hanging up, Jackson sat quietly for a long time. Steve's attitude bothered him, but it also clarified something important. For years, Jackson had approached charity the way Steve suggested, writing checks and maintaining distance. It was efficient and tax-deductible, but it wasn't personal. What he was doing with Rose and Penny felt different. It felt right. Around 8 o'clock, Penny knocked on his back door. She was wearing one of the new dresses they had bought that afternoon, a cheerful red sundress with white flowers. "Mr. Jackson, Grandma Rose is making tea. Would you like to join us?" The guest house felt warm and cozy when Jackson arrived. Rose had arranged fresh flowers from his garden on the table, and she had somehow made the small space feel like a real home. "This smells wonderful," Jackson said, accepting a cup of tea. "What kind is it?" "Chamomile with honey," Rose replied. "It was Linda's favorite. I always made it for her when she was little and couldn't sleep." They talked for an hour about everything and nothing. Penny's love of mathematics, Rose's years teaching, Jackson's memories of his grandmother. As the evening wound down, Jackson realized he felt more relaxed and content than he had in months. "Jackson," Rose said as he prepared to leave, "I want you to know how grateful we are. But I also want you to understand that we're not looking for a permanent handout. I'm going to find work as soon as possible, and we'll contribute to our expenses here. Rose, there's no rush. Focus on getting healthy and making sure Penny's settled." "That's kind, but I need to maintain my dignity and teach Penny that we earn our way in this world." Jackson nodded, understanding completely. "Then let's figure out how to make that work. Maybe you could help with some projects I have in mind." As he walked back to his house under the star-filled sky, Jackson felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood, the sense of belonging to something bigger than himself. His business success had brought him wealth and recognition, but it hadn't brought him the deep satisfaction he felt tonight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they navigated the legal requirements and helped Rose and Penny build a new life. But tonight, Jackson was simply grateful for the unexpected blessing of family that had come into his life through a brave little girl's warning about poison cake. The millionaire who had started this week focused solely on profit margins was ending it as a man who had discovered that the greatest wealth comes from opening your heart to others. And this was only the beginning of their journey together. Detective Claire Thompson arrived at Jackson's office building downtown early Monday morning, carrying a thick file folder and wearing a determined expression. The arrest of Martha Stevens and Ted Barnes had been just the beginning of her investigation into the poisoning attempt at the charity gala. Jackson met her in his corner office on the 20th floor, offering coffee and a view of Boston Harbor. His assistant had already cleared his morning schedule, so he could focus entirely on helping with the case. "We've made some concerning discoveries," Detective Thompson began, spreading crime scene photos and documents across Jackson's conference table. This wasn't just a business rivalry gone wrong. Barnes was deeper in debt than anyone knew, and he was getting pressure from some dangerous people. She showed Jackson bank records indicating that Barnes owed over $2 million to various creditors, including some with suspected organized crime connections. When your company won the South Boston housing contract, Barnes lost his last chance to avoid bankruptcy. That's when he approached Martha Stevens. "How did he know Martha?" Jackson asked, studying the financial documents. "She's his cousin. Stevens has worked for the catering company for 5 years with no previous problems, but Barnes convinced her that you had somehow cheated him out of the contract. He paid her $10,000 to put the poison in your cake." Jackson shook his head sadly. "The truth is, we won that contract because we promised better living conditions for residents and came in under budget. It wasn't personal against Barnes." "I know. And now Martha knows it too. She's been crying non-stop since we arrested her, saying she never would have done it if she'd understood the real situation." Detective Thompson pulled out another document. "Here's what really concerns me. Barnes had a backup plan. If the poisoning failed, He was prepared to have you beaten up or worse. We found text messages on his phone discussing other options. Jackson felt a chill run down his spine. The danger had been much greater than he had realized, which made Penny's warning even more significant. What happens now? Barnes will likely get 15 to 20 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. Stevens might get 5 to 7 years, but she's cooperating fully and showing genuine remorse. Detective Thompson closed the file. The immediate threat to you is over, but you should probably increase security for a while. After the detective left, Jackson sat in his office thinking about how random events could change everything. If Penny hadn't been looking through that kitchen window at exactly the right moment, if she hadn't had the courage to speak up, if he hadn't listened to her. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Dr. Rebecca Hayes. Jackson, I have the results from Rose's additional tests. Could you and Rose come in this afternoon? There are some things we need to discuss. Something in her tone worried him. Is everything all right? We'll talk when you get here. Can you come around 2 o'clock? Jackson immediately called Rose at the guest house. Over the past week, she had been helping Mrs. Chen with household tasks and organizing his home office, insisting on contributing despite his protests that she should rest. Rose, Dr. Rebecca wants to see us this afternoon about your test results. I'll be ready, Rose said calmly, but Jackson could hear the underlying concern in her voice. They drove to the clinic in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Jackson found himself praying, something he hadn't done much since childhood, that Rose's health problems would be treatable. The idea of losing her, of Penny losing another family member, was unbearable. Dr. Rebecca met them in her office with a serious but not hopeless expression. Rose, your tests confirm what I suspected. You have a heart condition that requires ongoing treatment, and your blood sugar levels indicate early-stage diabetes. The good news is that both conditions are very manageable with medication, diet changes, and regular monitoring. Rose listened carefully, asking practical questions about lifestyle modifications and treatment options. Jackson admired her composed reaction to news that would have terrified many people. What does this mean for Rose's daily life? Jackson asked. With proper care, she should live a long, healthy life. But she needs to avoid stress, maintain a healthy diet, take her medications consistently, and see a cardiologist regularly. Dr. Rebecca looked at Jackson meaningfully. The stable housing situation you've provided is actually crucial for her recovery. Stress and uncertainty were making her conditions much worse. After they left the clinic, Rose was quiet during the drive home. Finally, she spoke. Jackson, you need to know that these medical conditions could be expensive to treat long-term. I don't want to become a financial burden. Rose, that's not even a consideration. You and Penny are family now. But what if my health gets worse? What if I can't work or contribute? Jackson pulled into his driveway and turned to face her. Rose, when I was 12, my parents died in a plane crash. My grandmother Helen took me in even though she was living on Social Security and a small pension. She never made me feel like a burden, even when money was tight. She used to say that family takes care of family, no matter what. Rosie's eyes filled with tears. She sounds like a wonderful woman. She was, and she would have loved you and Penny. Jackson smiled. Helen taught me that the best investment you can make is in people you love. Everything else is just money. That evening, Jackson was working in his study when Penny knocked on the door. She had been unusually quiet since their return from the doctor's office. Mr. Jackson, is Grandma Rose going to be okay? Jackson set aside his papers and gestured for her to sit in the chair next to his desk. Yes, sweetheart. She's going to be fine. She just needs to take some medicine and eat healthy foods. But what if she gets sicker? What if she dies like Mama and Daddy did? Penny's voice was small and scared. Jackson felt his heart break for this brave little girl who had already experienced so much loss. He knelt down beside her chair. Penny, I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen, because that's not how life works. But I can promise you that your Grandma Rose is getting the best possible care, and Dr. Rebecca says she should be healthy for many, many years. But what if something does happen to her? Where would I go? Jackson took her small hands in his larger ones. "Penny, if anything ever happened to your grandmother, you would stay right here with me. You're part of my family now, and families stick together no matter what." Penny looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Really? You'd want to keep me?" "Sweetheart, I can't imagine my life without you and Grandma Rose in it. You've brought joy and purpose into my world that I didn't even know I was missing." She threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. "I love you, Mr. Jackson." "I love you too, Penny." Later that week, Jackson received a call from Michael Brown, his lawyer, with an update on the legal arrangements. "Everything is progressing smoothly with family services. They are impressed with how you've handled the situation, and Rose has been completely cooperative. The temporary guardianship should be finalized within the next few weeks." "What about long-term arrangements?" "That's up to you and Rose to decide. You could formalize adoption proceedings for Penny or maintain the current guardianship arrangement indefinitely. Rose would have input on all decisions, of course." Jackson found himself hoping that Rose would want to make the arrangement permanent. Over the past 2 weeks, his large, empty house had become a real home filled with laughter, conversation, and the comfortable rhythms of family life. The following Saturday, Jackson took Penny and Rose to visit his grandmother's grave at Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge. The September afternoon was beautiful, with leaves turning brilliant colors and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of autumn flowers. Helen Mitchell's headstone was simple but elegant, reading "Beloved Grandmother and Friend." Jackson had brought fresh flowers, white roses, Helen's favorites. "Grandma Helen, I want you to meet Rose and Penny," Jackson said softly, kneeling to place the flowers. "They are the family you always said I'd find when the time was right." Rose placed her hand on Jackson's shoulder. "She must have been very proud of the man you became." "I hope so. I think she would have loved you both." As they walked back through the cemetery, Penny skipped ahead, chasing falling leaves and laughing with pure joy. Rose and Jackson followed more slowly, comfortable in each other's company. "Jackson," Rose said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about what Dr. Rebecca said about my needing to avoid stress. For the first time in months, I'm not worried about where we'll sleep tonight or how I'll feed Penny. That's a gift I can never repay." "Rose, seeing Penny happy and knowing you're both safe is more valuable to me than any amount of money I could ever make. But I still want to contribute somehow. I've been thinking about tutoring children who need extra help with their studies. I could do it from the guest house a few hours a day." Jackson smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea, and I know just the person to help you get started." That afternoon, Jackson called Dr. Rebecca to ask if she knew families who might benefit from tutoring services. To his surprise, she suggested they meet for coffee to discuss it. They met at a small cafe in Beacon Hill, and Jackson found himself looking forward to seeing her again. Dr. Rebecca was passionate about education and community service, and she had several ideas for connecting Rose with families who needed academic support for their children. "There's a real need for quality tutoring in this area," Dr. Rebecca explained over coffee and pastries. "Many parents work multiple jobs and can't help their children with homework, and the after-school programs are overcrowded." As they talked, Jackson realized he was enjoying Dr. Rebecca's company in a way that had nothing to do with business obligation. She was intelligent, compassionate, and genuinely committed to helping others. When she smiled, her whole face lit up with warmth. "Jackson, can I ask you something?" Dr. Rebecca said as they prepared to leave. "What made you decide to take in Rose and Penny? Most people would have just given them money or connected them with social services." Jackson considered the question carefully. "I think it was partly gratitude for Penny saving my life, but mostly it was recognizing something I'd been missing. I've spent years building a successful business, but I hadn't built a real life. Rose and Penny gave me a chance to do something meaningful with my resources." That's a beautiful way to look at it. As they parted ways, Jackson found himself hoping he'd have more opportunities to spend time with Dr. Rebecca Hayes. There was something about her dedication to healing and helping others that made him want to be a better man. Driving home, Jackson reflected on how much his life had changed in just 3 weeks. The poisoning attempt that could have ended his life had instead opened his heart to possibilities he'd never imagined. He was no longer just a successful businessman. He was a guardian, a protector, and increasingly, a man falling in love with the idea of building something lasting and meaningful. As he pulled into his driveway, he could see Rose and Penny through the guest house window, working together on Penny's homework. The sight filled him with deep contentment and gratitude for the unexpected family that had blessed his life through a brave little girl's warning about poison cake. The investigation might be closing, but Jackson's new life was just beginning. October brought crisp autumn air and a comfortable routine to Jackson's household. Rose had been seeing Dr. Rebecca weekly for her heart condition and diabetes management, and the medication was helping her feel stronger each day. Penny had been attending Beacon Hill Elementary School for 3 weeks and was already impressing her teachers with her mathematical abilities and eager curiosity. Jackson stood at his office window on a Thursday afternoon, watching pedestrians hurry past on the street below. His assistant knocked and entered with a folder of documents. "Mr. Mitchell, I have the enrollment papers for Penny's placement at Brookside Academy," Jennifer said, setting the papers on his desk. The principal called to say they are excited to have her join their accelerated mathematics program. Brookside Academy was one of Boston's most prestigious private schools, with small class sizes and exceptional resources for gifted students. Jackson had visited the campus with Rose and Penny the previous week, and both had been amazed by the science laboratories, computer center, and extensive library. Did Rose sign the financial aid forms? Jackson asked, knowing how important it was to Rose that she contribute something toward Penny's education. "Yes, though she insisted on the work-study program, where she'll help in the library 20 hours a week in exchange for reduced tuition." Jackson smiled. Even though he could easily afford the full tuition, Rose had insisted on finding a way to contribute. Her dignity and determination to maintain independence continued to impress him. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Dr. Rebecca. "Jackson, do you have a few minutes to talk? I have some wonderful news about Rose's health progress." "Of course. Should I come to the clinic?" "Actually, I'm finishing my shift in about an hour. Would you like to meet for an early dinner? There's something else I'd like to discuss with you about a community project." Jackson felt his heart rate increase slightly. Over the past month, he had found excuses to accompany Rose to several medical appointments, and each conversation with Dr. Rebecca left him more impressed by her intelligence and compassion. "I'd love to. Where would you like to meet?" They agreed on a small Italian restaurant in the North End, and Jackson spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on quarterly budget reports while thinking about seeing Rebecca again. The restaurant was warm and intimate, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of garlic and fresh herbs filling the air. Rebecca was already seated at a corner table when Jackson arrived, and she looked beautiful in a navy dress with a colorful scarf. "You look lovely," Jackson said as he sat down across from her. "Thank you." Rebecca smiled, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I have to admit, it's nice to have dinner somewhere other than the hospital cafeteria." They ordered wine and pasta, and Rebecca shared Rose's latest test results. Her blood pressure had stabilized, her blood sugar levels were much improved, and her overall health was better than it had been in over a year. "The stable housing and reduced stress have made an enormous difference," Rebecca explained. "But beyond that, Rose has a sense of purpose again. She talks constantly about the tutoring work she's starting and how proud she is of Penny's academic progress. Rose is remarkable. I've never met anyone with such strength and grace under pressure. She reminds me of my own grandmother," Rebecca said thoughtfully. "Grandma Elena came to America from Italy with nothing but determination and hope. She raised 6 children during the Depression and never complained about how hard life was." As they ate, Jackson learned more about Rebecca's background. She had grown up in a working-class family in South Boston, worked her way through medical school, and chosen community medicine over more lucrative specialties because she wanted to help families like the one she came from. "My parents always taught me that success meant using your abilities to serve others, not just to get ahead yourself," Rebecca said. "When I see what you're doing for Rose and Penny, I recognize that same philosophy. I'm not sure I deserve that much credit. Rose and Penny have brought more joy into my life than I've given them." Rebecca studied his face carefully. "Jackson, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why aren't you married? I mean, you're successful, kind, generous. I would have expected someone to have claimed you by now." Jackson laughed, but there was a note of sadness in it. I've been so focused on building my business that I never made time for relationships. I dated occasionally, but I never met anyone who made me want to change my priorities. And now, Jackson met her eyes across the table. Now I'm discovering that the most important things in life can't be scheduled or planned. They just happen when you're open to them. There was a moment of comfortable silence as they both absorbed the implications of that statement. You mentioned a community project, Jackson said, steering the conversation to safer ground. Rebecca's face lit up with enthusiasm. Yes. The Community Health Center wants to start a program pairing volunteer tutors with families who need academic support for their children. We could provide space for the tutoring sessions and coordinate with local schools to identify students who would benefit. That sounds perfect for Rose. Exactly. She could be our lead tutor coordinator, and we could eventually expand to include other retired teachers. It would be a real community service program that helps families while giving experienced educators a way to stay involved. Jackson felt excited by the possibility. What would you need to get started? Funding for supplies, books, and a small salary for the coordinator position. Maybe $15,000 to launch the program. Consider it done. Rebecca looked surprised. Jackson, you haven't even seen a formal proposal. Rebecca, if you and Rose are involved, I know it will be excellent. Besides, this kind of community investment is exactly what I want to focus on. After dinner, they walked along the waterfront, talking about their shared vision for community service and education programs. The October evening was cool and clear, with city lights reflecting on the harbor water. Jackson, Rebecca said as they stopped to look out at the water, thank you for dinner and for supporting the tutoring program. It means a lot to know there are people like you who genuinely care about making a difference. Thank you for including me in your work. I'm learning that business success feels hollow compared to the satisfaction of helping others build better lives. They were standing close enough that Jackson could smell Rebecca's perfume, something light and floral that suited her perfectly. He felt an almost overwhelming urge to take her hand or move closer, but he held back, unsure if his feelings were reciprocated. I should get you back to your car, he said reluctantly. As he drove home, Jackson found himself humming along to the radio, feeling happier than he had in years. The evening with Rebecca had confirmed what he had been hoping, that his growing feelings for her might be mutual. At home, he found Rose and Penny in the main house kitchen, working together to bake cookies for Penny's new classmates at Brookside Academy. How was your dinner? Rose asked with a knowing smile. Very nice. Dr. Rebecca has some exciting ideas for a community tutoring program, and she thinks you'd be perfect to help coordinate it. Rose's eyes lit up with interest as Jackson explained the program details. The idea of working with children and families again clearly energized her. When could I start? She asked. As soon as you feel ready. Rebecca is going to call you tomorrow to discuss the details. Penny looked up from the cookie dough she was mixing. Grandma Rose, you'll be a teacher again. In a way, sweetheart. I'll be helping children learn and grow, which is what I've always loved most. The next evening was Friday, and Jackson had invited Rebecca to join them for dinner at the house. Rose had insisted on cooking, preparing a famous pot roast with vegetables from Jackson's garden. The dining room felt warm and welcoming, with candles and fresh flowers on the table. Jackson watched Rebecca interact with Rose and Penny, impressed by how naturally she fit into their family dynamic. Dr. Rebecca, Penny said during dessert, Mr. Jackson says you help sick people feel better. That's right, sweetheart. I'm a doctor who takes care of people when they're not feeling well. Are you going to help Grandma Rose stay healthy? I'm going to do everything I can to make sure your grandmother feels strong and well for a very long time. After dinner, while Rose helped Penny with her weekend reading assignment, Jackson and Rebecca sat in the living room talking about their shared interest in community development. Jackson, I have a confession, Rebecca said, curling up in the corner of his large sofa. When you first brought Rose and Penny to the clinic, I was skeptical about your motives. I've seen wealthy people make grand gestures before, then lose interest when the situation becomes complicated. And now I see that this isn't charity or obligation for you. It's love. You genuinely care about Rose and Penny as individuals, not as a cause. Jackson felt his heart racing. Rebecca, spending time with you over these past weeks has made me realize something important. What's that? I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca looked surprised but not unhappy. Jackson, she began, I know it might seem sudden, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. You're intelligent, compassionate, dedicated to helping others. When I'm with you, I feel like I'm becoming the person I always wanted to be. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, and Jackson worried he had moved too fast and ruined their growing friendship. Jackson, I have feelings for you too, she said finally. But I need you to understand something about me. I'm not interested in being someone's trophy wife or arm candy at business events. My work is important to me, and I need a partner who respects and supports that. Rebecca, your dedication to your patients and your community is one of the things I admire most about you. I would never ask you to change or give up your career. She smiled, reaching for his hand. Then yes, I'm falling in love with you too. Jackson felt as if his heart might burst with happiness. He leaned over and kissed her gently, a soft, sweet kiss that felt like a promise of wonderful things to come. When they broke apart, Rebecca laughed softly. You know, Rose has been matchmaking from the beginning. She's made at least 3 comments about how nice it would be if I joined the family permanently. Rose is a wise woman. Yes, she is. They talked until nearly midnight, sharing their dreams for the future and their growing commitment to each other and to the community they wanted to serve together. When Rebecca finally left, Jackson walked her to her car, holding her hand and feeling grateful for the unexpected blessing of love that had entered his life. Standing in his driveway under the star-filled October sky, Jackson reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 2 months ago, he had been a successful but lonely businessman focused solely on profit and expansion. Tonight, he was a man deeply in love, part of a family he adored, and committed to using his resources to build something meaningful and lasting. The poisoning attempt that nearly ended his life had instead opened his heart to possibilities he never knew existed. As he walked back to his house, Jackson could see Rose and Penny through the guest house window, reading together before bedtime. Soon, if things continued to develop with Rebecca, that guest house might become a grandparent suite in a much larger, more wonderful family. What do you think will happen with Jackson and Rebecca's relationship? Will Rose approve of their growing romance? Subscribe and leave a comment with your thoughts about how this beautiful love story should unfold. The millionaire who had started this journey as a target for poisoning was ending this chapter as a man blessed with love, family, and purpose. And the best was yet to come. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a light dusting of snow covering Jackson's Beacon Hill neighborhood. The house was filled with wonderful smells, turkey roasting in the oven, sweet potato casserole, and Rose's famous apple pie cooling on the kitchen counter. For the first time in years, Jackson was hosting a real family Thanksgiving. Rebecca arrived early to help with the cooking, bringing homemade cranberry sauce, and wearing a beautiful burgundy dress that complemented her auburn hair. Jackson felt his heart skip as she kissed his cheek in greeting. "Good morning, handsome," she said softly, making him feel like the luckiest man in Boston. "Good morning, beautiful. How did I get so fortunate?" In the kitchen, Rose was directing the meal preparation with the efficiency of a woman who had cooked for church potlucks and school events for decades. She wore her best blue dress and an apron that read "World's Best Grandma," a gift from Penny. "Rebecca, dear, could you help me with the gravy?" Rose called. Jackson's many talents don't extend to cooking. Jackson laughed, remembering his failed attempts to help earlier. "I'm much better at setting tables and opening wine." Penny danced around the kitchen in a new green dress, excited about their first Thanksgiving as a complete family. She had made place cards for everyone, decorating them with drawings of turkeys and autumn leaves. "Mr. Jackson, when are we going to eat? I'm getting really hungry," Penny announced. "In about an hour, sweetheart. Why don't you go make sure the dining room looks perfect?" As Penny skipped away, Jackson caught Rebecca's hand and pulled her aside into the hallway. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small wrapped box from his pocket. "Jackson, it's not Christmas yet," Rebecca protested, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. Inside the box was a delicate gold necklace with a heart-shaped pendant set with a small diamond. "It's beautiful," Rebecca whispered. "But Jackson, this is too much." "It's not nearly enough," he replied, fastening the necklace around her neck. "Rebecca, these past 2 months with you have been the happiest of my life." She turned to face him, the necklace catching the light. "Jackson, I love you." "I love you too," he said, kissing her forehead gently. From the kitchen, Rose's voice called out, "You two come help serve this feast before it gets cold." Dinner was everything Jackson had hoped it would be. The dining room table was set with his grandmother's china and silver, candles flickering warmly, and the autumn centerpiece Penny had helped arrange. Looking around the table at Rose, Penny, and Rebecca, Jackson felt overwhelming gratitude for the family that had come into his life through tragedy and grown through love. "Before we eat," Rose said, reaching for Jackson and Penny's hands, "let's say what we are thankful for." They joined hands around the table, and Rose began. "I'm thankful for second chances, for Jackson's generous heart, and for my precious granddaughter's courage that started all of this." Penny went next. "I'm thankful for Mr. Jackson and Dr. Rebecca and Grandma Rose, and for having a real home and not being scared anymore." Jackson felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I'm thankful for a brave little girl who saved my life, for Rose's wisdom and strength, and for Rebecca's love that makes every day better." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "I'm thankful for the opportunity to be part of this beautiful family, and for Jackson's example of how generosity and love can transform lives." The meal was delicious, filled with laughter and conversation. Rebecca and Rose shared stories about their grandmother's cooking, while Penny entertained them with accounts of her new friends at Brookside Academy. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where Jackson had built a fire in the fireplace. Penny curled up on the rug with a book, while Rose settled into the comfortable armchair with her knitting. "Jackson," Rebecca said softly, sitting beside him on the sofa, "this is the most wonderful Thanksgiving I've ever had." "Mine too. I used to spend Thanksgiving alone or at business dinners. I never knew what I was missing." They talked quietly while Rose and Penny enjoyed the peaceful evening. Around 8 o'clock, Penny's head began to nod as she tried to keep reading. "Come here, sweetheart," Rose said, opening her arms. "Let's get you ready for bed." After Rose and Penny had gone to the guest house, Jackson and Rebecca sat by the fire, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about their future together. "Rebecca, I've been thinking about something," Jackson said, taking her hand. "I want to expand the community health center services. What if we opened a family wellness center that provides not just medical care, but also tutoring, job training, and social services?" Rebecca's eyes lit up with excitement. "That would be amazing. There's such a need for comprehensive family support in this area." "I was thinking Rose could be the education coordinator, you could oversee the medical services, and I could handle the business and funding aspects." "Jackson, that would take significant investment. Are you sure you want to commit that kind of money?" Jackson moved closer to her on the sofa. "Rebecca, I want to commit much more than money. I want to commit my life to you and to the work we can do together." Before she could respond, he slid off the sofa and knelt on one knee beside her, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Rebecca Hayes, will you marry me?" Rebecca gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The engagement ring was beautiful but not ostentatious, a single diamond surrounded by smaller stones, elegant and classic. "Jackson, oh my goodness. I know it's only been a few months, but I've never been more certain about anything in my life. I love you. I love the work we do together, and I want to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with you." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "Yes, Jackson. Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply, feeling as if his heart might burst with joy and gratitude. "I have to tell Rose and Penny," Rebecca said, laughing through her tears. They walked across the garden to the guest house, where Rose was reading in the living room while Penny slept in the bedroom. "Rose," Rebecca called softly, "we have some news." Rose looked up from her book, saw Rebecca's tear-streaked face and Jackson's huge grin, and immediately understood. "Oh, my dears," she said, standing to embrace them both. "I'm so happy for you. I could see this coming from the first day you brought us to the clinic." "You're not surprised?" Jackson asked. "Honey, I may be old, But I'm not blind. The way you two look at each other, anyone could see you were meant to be together." They talked for another hour, making preliminary wedding plans and discussing how their engagement would affect their family dynamic. Rose assured them that she and Penny would be thrilled to gain Rebecca as an official family member. "When do you want to tell Penny?" Rebecca asked. "First thing tomorrow morning," Rose replied. "That child loves you already, Rebecca. She's going to be over the moon." The next morning, Jackson and Rebecca sat with Penny at the breakfast table in the main house kitchen. Mrs. Chen had prepared a special celebration breakfast with pancakes shaped like hearts. "Penny," Jackson began, "Rebecca and I have some exciting news to share with you." Penny looked back and forth between them, her green eyes bright with curiosity. Rebecca held out her left hand, showing the engagement ring. "Jackson asked me to marry him, and I said yes." Penny's face broke into the biggest smile Jackson had ever seen. "Really? You're going to get married and be my family forever?" "That's right, sweetheart," Rebecca said. "How do you feel about that?" "I think it's the most wonderful thing ever," Penny declared, jumping up to hug both of them. "Can I be in the wedding?" "Of course you can," Jackson replied. "We wouldn't get married without you." Over the following weeks, wedding planning became a joyful family activity. They decided on a spring wedding, small and intimate, focused on celebration rather than extravagance. Rebecca wanted to be married at the community center, where she volunteered, with the reception in Jackson's garden. The engagement news generated excitement throughout their extended community. Dr. Rebecca's colleagues at the health center were thrilled, and Jackson's business associates were curious about the woman who had captured Boston's most eligible bachelor. "I have to admit," Steve Martinez said during a business lunch, "you seem happier than I've ever seen you. Marriage and parenthood agree with you." "Thanks, Steve. I never realized how empty my life was until Rose and Penny and Rebecca filled it up." "And you're really going through with this Family Wellness Center project?" Jackson nodded. "We're breaking ground in the spring. It's going to be incredible. Medical services, educational programs, job training, childcare. Everything families need to thrive." Steve shook his head in amazement. "A year ago, you were focused entirely on profit margins and expansion. Now you're talking about comprehensive social services." "A year ago, I hadn't learned what really matters in life." In December, Jackson surprised Rebecca with a weekend trip to New York City to see the Christmas lights and do some wedding shopping. They stayed at the Plaza Hotel and spent Saturday wandering through Central Park and visiting museums. "Jackson, this is magical," Rebecca said as they ice skated at Rockefeller Center. "But you know I'd be just as happy spending a quiet evening at home with Rose and Penny." "I know, and that's one of the things I love about you. But I want to spoil you sometimes, too." They found Rebecca's wedding dress at a boutique in Soho, a simple but elegant design in ivory silk that made her look radiant. For Penny, they chose a lavender dress that would make her feel like a princess. On Sunday afternoon, as they walked through the Christmas market at Bryant Park, Rebecca stopped suddenly and turned to Jackson. "I want you to know something," she said seriously. "Marrying you isn't just about our love for each other. It's about the family we're creating together and the work we're going to do in the community." "I feel exactly the same way," Jackson replied. "This isn't just a wedding. It's the beginning of our mission together." As they flew back to Boston that evening, Jackson looked down at the city lights and reflected on the extraordinary year he'd had. The poisoning attempt that had nearly ended his life had instead opened his heart to love, family, and purpose he never knew existed. Beside him, Rebecca dozed against his shoulder, her engagement ring catching the airplane's reading light. In a few months, she would be his wife, and together they would build something beautiful and lasting. The millionaire who had started this journey alone and focused solely on profit was ending this chapter as a man blessed with love, family, and a mission that would benefit their entire community. The best was yet to come, and Jackson could hardly wait to see what wonderful surprises the next chapters of their lives would bring. Spring arrived early in Boston, bringing warm sunshine and the promise of new beginnings to Jackson's household. The cherry trees in his back garden were blooming pink and white, and Rose had started a vegetable garden behind the guest house. The wedding was planned for May 15th, just 6 weeks away. Jackson stood in what had once been an empty lot in South Boston, surrounded by construction equipment and workers in hard hats. The Family Wellness Center was taking shape, a modern but welcoming building that would serve hundreds of families in the community. "Mr. Mitchell, we're ahead of schedule," the construction foreman reported. "The medical wing should be ready for equipment installation by early June." Rebecca approached from across the construction site, wearing jeans and a bright blue sweater, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had been meeting with the architects about the layout of the examination rooms and therapy spaces. "How does it look?" Jackson asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Perfect. The pediatric area is going to be especially wonderful. Bright colors, child-sized furniture, and a play area that will help kids feel comfortable." They walked through what would become the main lobby, envisioning families arriving for medical appointments, tutoring sessions, and community meetings. Rose would have her own office where she could coordinate the educational programs, and there would be classrooms for everything from GED preparation to computer training. "Jackson, I still can't believe we're really doing this," Rebecca said, looking around the construction site with amazement. "Believe it. In 4 months, this will be serving families throughout South Boston." As they drove home, Rebecca was unusually quiet, gazing out the window at the neighborhoods they passed. "What are you thinking about?" Jackson asked. "I'm thinking about how many lives are going to be changed by this center. Children who will get the tutoring they need to succeed in school, parents who will receive job training in healthcare, families who will have a safe place to turn when they need help." And it all started with a little girl brave enough to warn a stranger about poison cake. That evening, Jackson found Rose in the guest house kitchen, preparing lessons for the tutoring program she was already running part-time at the community health center. Her success with the initial group of students had convinced Jackson that she was the perfect person to lead the educational initiatives at the new wellness center. "How many students are you working with now?" Jackson asked, sitting down at her small table. 12, Rose replied with obvious pride. "And I have a waiting list of 8 more families who want tutoring help for their children." "That's incredible, Rose. You're making such a difference." Rose set down her pen and looked at Jackson seriously. "Jackson, I need to talk to you about something." "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been thinking about my living situation. When you marry Rebecca, you'll want privacy as newlyweds. Maybe it's time for Penny and me to find our own apartment." Jackson felt a moment of panic. The idea of Rose and Penny leaving felt like losing family all over again. "Rose, absolutely not. This is your home now, and Rebecca loves having you here as much as I do. But surely you and Rebecca will want to start your own family without an old woman and her granddaughter underfoot." "Rose, Rebecca and I have already talked about this. We want to start our family with you and Penny as the foundation. Any children we have will be blessed to grow up with you as their grandmother and Penny as their big sister." Tears filled Rose's eyes. "Do you really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more in my life. Rose, you and Penny aren't guests here. You're family." The next morning, Jackson received an unexpected phone call at his office. It was Martha Stevens, the woman who had poisoned his cake at the charity gala 6 months earlier. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Martha Stevens. I know you have no reason to speak with me, but I'm calling from prison to ask for your forgiveness." Jackson was surprised by the call, but not angry. "Martha, I appreciate you reaching out. I've had 6 months to think about what I did, and I'm horrified by my actions. My cousin Ted convinced me that you had cheated him out of business contracts, but I learned the truth during the trial. You won those contracts fairly because you offered better services at lower prices. Martha, I forgive you. I know you were manipulated and desperate." "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. That means more than you know. I also want you to know that I've been following news about your wellness center project. What you're doing to help families in the community, that's real goodness." After the call ended, Jackson sat quietly in his office, reflecting on how much had changed since that terrifying night at the charity gala. What had started as an attempt to destroy his life had led to the greatest blessings he had ever received. That weekend was Penny's 9th birthday, and Jackson had planned a special celebration. He had invited her entire class from Brookside Academy for a party in his back garden, complete with a bounce house, face painting, and a magician. Rebecca arrived early to help decorate, bringing balloons and streamers in Penny's favorite colors, purple and silver. "She's going to love this," Rebecca said as they hung streamers from the maple trees. Rose emerged from the guest house carrying a 3-layer chocolate cake she had baked from scratch, decorated with 9 candles and Penny's name in purple frosting. "Grandma Rose, that's the most beautiful cake I've ever seen," Rebecca exclaimed. "It's Penny's favorite recipe, the same cake I used to make for her mother's birthdays." When the party guests arrived, Jackson was amazed to see how popular Penny had become at her new school. Children from various backgrounds and ethnicities played together in his garden, their laughter filling the air with joy. "Mr. Jackson," Penny said, finding him near the refreshment table, "this is the best birthday party ever. I'm so glad you're happy, sweetheart. Can I tell you a secret?" Jackson knelt down to her level. "Always. I used to wish every night that I could have a daddy like the other kids at school. Now I have you, and soon I'll have Dr. Rebecca as my mommy too." Jackson felt his eyes fill with tears. "Penny, you've made my life so much better just by being in it." "I love you, Daddy Jackson." It was the first time she had called him Daddy, and Jackson felt his heart swell with overwhelming love and gratitude. Later that evening, after the party guest had gone home and the decorations had been cleaned up, Jackson sat with Rebecca on his back porch watching Rose and Penny look at the stars through a telescope he had given Penny as a birthday gift. "She called you Daddy today," Rebecca observed. "Did you hear that? I think the whole neighborhood heard it, and I think you started crying right there in front of all those 9-year-olds. Jackson laughed. "I couldn't help it. I never thought I'd have a daughter, and certainly not one as amazing as Penny." "Jackson, I need to tell you something." Something in Rebecca's tone made him turn to look at her more carefully. "What is it?" "I've been offered a position as Chief of Community Medicine at Boston General Hospital. It would be a significant promotion with much higher salary." Jackson felt his stomach tighten. "Congratulations. That's wonderful. But I'm going to turn it down." "Rebecca, why would you do that?" "Because my work is here, with you and the wellness center and the families in this community. I don't want to spend my days in corporate meetings and administrative tasks. I want to provide direct care to people who need it." Jackson took her hands in his. "Rebecca, I don't want you to give up career opportunities because of me. I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing what matters most to me, our work together and the difference we can make in people's lives." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more certain about anything." The next week, Jackson received a visit from an unexpected source. Detective Claire Thompson knocked on his office door with a folder of documents and a serious expression. "Detective Thompson, it's good to see you. Is everything all right?" "I have news about Ted Barnes. He's been released from prison on a medical parole program. He has terminal cancer and probably only has a few months to live." Jackson felt surprised but not threatened. "I appreciate you letting me know. There's more. Barnes has asked to meet with you. He says he wants to make amends before he dies." Jackson considered the request carefully. Part of him wanted to refuse, to maintain distance from the man who had tried to have him killed. But another part of him recognized that forgiveness and redemption was central to everything he now believed about life and family. Where does he want to meet? At the Cancer Treatment Center at Mass General. He's there for chemotherapy 3 times a week. 2 days later, Jackson walked through the halls of Mass General's oncology wing, carrying a small bouquet of flowers and wondering what he would say to the man who had once wanted him dead. Ted Barnes was sitting in a chemotherapy chair, connected to an IV drip, looking much thinner and older than Jackson remembered. His face was gaunt, his hair gone from the treatments, but his eyes held a clarity and peace that Jackson hadn't expected. "Mr. Mitchell," Barnes said weakly, "thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Jackson sat down in the visitor chair beside the treatment station. "How are you feeling?" "Like a man who's running out of time to fix his mistakes." Barnes smiled sadly. "I heard about your wellness center project. It's exactly the kind of community investment I should have been doing instead of fighting with competitors and cutting corners to maximize profits. It's never too late to make a difference, Ted. Actually, it is too late for me, but maybe not too late to help you." Barnes reached for a folder on the table beside his chair. I want to donate my remaining assets to your wellness center. It's not much after paying legal fees and medical bills, but it should be about $50,000. Jackson was stunned by the unexpected generosity. Ted, that's incredibly generous, but are you sure? Don't you have family who need that money? My ex-wife and I divorced years ago, and we never had children. The money won't bring back the years I wasted on anger and greed, but maybe it can help some families build better lives. As they talked, Jackson learned that Ted had spent his months in prison reading and reflecting on his choices. He had started a literacy program for other inmates and had found peace through helping others learn to read. Mr. Mitchell, Jackson, I need you to know how sorry I am for what I did. Trying to have you killed was the act of a desperate, evil man. I'm grateful every day that little girl saved your life, because your death would have been on my conscience forever. Ted, I forgive you completely. What you did led to the greatest blessings of my life, my family, and the work I'm doing now. You're a better man than I ever was, Ted said, tears streaming down his thin face. Promise me something. What's that? Promise me you'll use my donation to help children get the education and opportunities one never provided for anyone. I promise, Ted. When Jackson left the hospital that afternoon, he felt a profound sense of closure and amazement at how God could work even through terrible circumstances to bring about redemption and blessing. Ted Barnes, who had once been his enemy, was now contributing to the very project that would honor everything Jackson had learned about love, family, and service to others. That evening, as Jackson shared the day's events with Rebecca, Rose, and Penny over dinner, he marveled at how their family had been built not just through love and generosity, but also through forgiveness and second chances. So Mr. Barnes is helping build the wellness center now? Penny asked. That's right, sweetheart. Sometimes people who make bad choices can learn to make good choices instead. Like how Grandma Rose always says everyone deserves forgiveness if they really want to change. Jackson smiled at Rose, whose wisdom continued to guide their family's approach to life and relationships. In just 3 weeks, he would marry Rebecca and officially become part of the most loving, generous, and purpose-driven family he could have imagined. The Wellness Center would open in the fall, serving hundreds of families with medical care, education, and community support. But more importantly, it would represent the transformation of a man who had almost lost everything to poisoning into a family dedicated to healing and hope. The best chapter of Jackson's life was about to begin. The first week of May brought unseasonably warm weather to Boston and the final preparations for Jackson and Rebecca's wedding. Rose had been working with Mrs. Chen to transform Jackson's back garden into a wedding venue, while Penny practiced walking down the aisle with her flower girl basket. Jackson was in his downtown office reviewing construction reports from the Wellness Center when his assistant Jennifer knocked urgently on his door. Mr. Mitchell, there are 2 men here to see you. They say it's about Ted Barnes and they won't leave without speaking with you. Jackson felt a chill of concern. Ted Barnes had died peacefully the previous week, and Jackson had attended his small funeral service at the request of the hospital chaplain. Send them in, Jennifer. 2 men in expensive suits entered his office, both wearing sunglasses despite being indoors. The older man, probably in his 50s with gray hair and cold blue eyes, spoke first. Mr. Mitchell, I'm Frank Russo. This is my associate Tony DiMarco. We had some business dealings with Ted Barnes before his unfortunate death. Jackson gestured for them to sit, but they remained standing. What can I do for you, gentlemen? Barnes owed our organization a substantial amount of money when he died. We understand he made a donation to your charity project with funds that rightfully belong to us. Jackson felt his jaw tighten. Mr. Barnes made a legal donation of his own assets to the Family Wellness Center. All documentation was handled through proper legal channels. Legal or not, that money was meant to pay Barnes' debt to us. We expect full repayment within 30 days, or we'll find other ways to collect what we owed. The threat was barely veiled, but Jackson refused to be intimidated. Gentlemen, I suggest you consult with your attorney about the legal process for collecting debts from deceased persons. The donation Mr. Barnes made was completely legitimate. Frank Russo smiled without warmth. Mr. Mitchell, you have a lovely family. That elderly lady and little girl living on your property, and your fiancé the doctor. It would be unfortunate if anything disrupted their peaceful lives. Jackson stood up, his anger barely controlled. Are you threatening my family? We're simply noting that you have a lot to lose if this matter isn't resolved properly, Tony DiMarco said, speaking for the first time. This meeting is over, Jackson said firmly. Jennifer, please call security to escort these gentlemen out. After they left, Jackson immediately called Detective Claire Thompson to report the incident. Then he called Rebecca at the clinic to warn her to be careful. Jackson, should we postpone the wedding? Rebecca asked, her voice tight with worry. Absolutely not. We're not letting criminals dictate how we live our lives. But I am hiring security guards for the house until this is resolved. That evening, Jackson sat in his living room with Rose, Penny, and Rebecca, explaining the situation as calmly as possible. Are the bad men going to hurt us? Penny asked, her green eyes wide with the same fear Jackson had seen when she first warned him about the poison cake. No, sweetheart, Jackson said firmly, kneeling down to her level. I've hired security guards to keep us safe, and the police are investigating. Nothing is going to happen to our family. Rose, who had been quiet during the explanation, finally spoke. Jackson, I think Penny and I should go stay somewhere else until this is over. We don't want to bring danger to you and Rebecca. Absolutely not, Rebecca said before Jackson could respond. We're family, and families stick together during difficult times. But if something happened to Penny because of money that was donated in our names... Rose, Jackson interrupted gently. The money Ted Barnes donated came from selling his legitimate assets. These people have no legal claim to it, and I'm not going to be bullied into paying criminals who are trying to exploit a dead man's debts. Over the next few days, Jackson hired a professional security firm to provide discreet protection for his family and the Wellness Center construction site. Detective Thompson assured him that the police were investigating Russo and DiMarco's connections to organized crime. Despite the stress, wedding preparations continued. Jackson refused to let threats and intimidation steal the joy from what should be the happiest time of his life. The rehearsal dinner was held at a small Italian restaurant in the North End, with just their closest family and friends attending. Rose had invited Mrs. Chen and her husband. Rebecca's parents had flown in from Florida, and Jackson's business partner Steve Martinez came with his wife. I have to say, Rebecca's father said during his toast, when Rebecca told us she was marrying a millionaire, we expected someone flashy and self-centered. Instead, we're gaining a son-in-law who's dedicated his life to serving others. Jackson squeezed Rebecca's hand under the table, grateful for her family's acceptance and support. After dinner, as they walked back to their cars, Jackson noticed a black sedan following them at a distance. The security guards he had hired were also aware of the surveillance, but advised him to continue with normal activities while they monitored the situation. Jackson, Rebecca said as they stood in his driveway, I need you to know that whatever happens, I'm not afraid. What we have together, what we're building with Rose and Penny, it's worth fighting for. I love you, Rebecca Hayes. Tomorrow, you become Rebecca Mitchell, and we start the rest of our lives together. The wedding morning dawned clear and beautiful, with gentle spring sunshine and a soft breeze carrying the scent of cherry blossoms. Jackson woke early and spent time in prayer, asking for protection for his family and gratitude for all the blessings that had come into his life. Rose and Mrs. Chen had outdone themselves with the garden decorations. White chairs were arranged in neat rows facing an arch covered with roses and ivy. Penny's flower petals were ready in a silver basket, and the small quartet Jackson had hired was tuning their instruments. By noon, guests began arriving. Jackson was touched to see Dr. Rebecca's colleagues from the clinic, families from Rose's tutoring program, and construction workers from the Wellness Center project. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a community celebration. Jackson stood at the altar in his navy blue suit, watching as Penny walked down the aisle scattering rose petals with careful precision. She looked beautiful in her lavender dress, her face glowing with happiness. Then Rebecca appeared at the back of the garden, and Jackson felt his breath catch in his throat. She was radiant in her ivory silk dress, carrying a simple bouquet of white roses. Rose walked beside her, having been honored with the privilege of giving Rebecca away since her own father had health problems that prevented him from walking. As Rebecca approached, Jackson saw her glance around the garden at the security guards positioned discreetly among the guests. For a moment, He worried that the threat of danger would overshadow their wedding day. But then Rebecca's eyes met his, and her face broke into the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. In that moment, Jackson knew that nothing, not criminals or threats or outside pressures, could diminish the love and commitment they were making to each other. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. They had written their own vows, promising not just to love and cherish each other, but to continue their work serving families in their community. "Rebecca," Jackson said, his voice strong and clear, "you have shown me what it means to live with purpose and compassion. I promise to be your partner in love, in service, and in building a family dedicated to helping others." "Jackson," Rebecca replied, tears of joy streaming down her face, "you have taught me that true wealth comes from generosity, and that the greatest success is measured by the lives we touch. I promise to stand with you in all of our work and to love you more each day." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson kissed Rebecca with all the love and gratitude in his heart. Around them, their guests erupted in applause, and Jackson could see Rose wiping tears from her eyes while Penny clapped excitedly. The reception in the garden was filled with laughter, good food, and heartfelt toasts. Jackson's business colleagues mingled with Rebecca's medical associates and families from their community programs, creating the kind of diverse, warm gathering that represented everything Jackson and Rebecca valued. During their first dance, Rebecca whispered in Jackson's ear, "This is perfect. Even with all the stress and threats, this day is exactly what I dreamed it would be." "Just wait until you see what I have planned for our honeymoon," Jackson replied, spinning her gently under the string lights Mrs. Chen had hung throughout the garden. Around sunset, as the reception was winding down, Detective Thompson appeared at Jackson's side. "Sorry to interrupt, but I have news. We arrested Russo and D.I. Marco this afternoon on extortion charges. They had outstanding warrants in 3 states, and they won't be bothering you again." Jackson felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you, Detective. Perfect timing." As their guests began to leave, Jackson and Rebecca stood together in their garden, surrounded by Rose, Penny, and Mrs. Chen, watching the cleanup and feeling grateful for the community that had celebrated with them. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell," Penny said, trying out Rebecca's new name, "when you come back from your honeymoon, can we have a family meeting about my room in the big house?" Jackson and Rebecca exchanged glances. They had talked about Penny moving into one of the bedrooms in the main house after the wedding, making their family arrangement more permanent and traditional. "Of course, sweetheart," Rebecca replied. "This is your home now, and we want you to feel completely comfortable here." Later that night, after changing out of their wedding clothes and saying goodbye to out-of-town guests, Jackson and Rebecca sat on their back porch looking up at the stars. "Mrs. Mitchell," Jackson said softly, "how does it feel to be married?" "It feels like the beginning of the most wonderful adventure," Rebecca replied, snuggling closer to him. "Jackson, when those men threatened us earlier this week, I realized something important." "What's that?" "I realized that what we have, this family, this work, this love, it's strong enough to survive any challenge. People like Russo and D.I. Marco can threaten us, but they can't touch what really matters." Jackson nodded, thinking about how much he had grown and changed since that night at the charity gala when Penny had warned him about the poison cake. "Rebecca, a year ago I measured success by profit margins and stock prices. Now I measure it by Penny's smile when she talks about school, Rose's pride in her tutoring students, and the knowledge that our wellness center will serve hundreds of families." "And how do you measure love?" Jackson turned to face his new wife, this remarkable woman who had transformed his understanding of what it meant to live a meaningful life. "I measure love by the fact that even when criminals were threatening our family, you never suggested we change our plans or compromise our values. I measure it by Rose's willingness to trust a stranger with her granddaughter's future. I measure it by Penny calling me daddy and meaning it." As they headed inside to begin their first night as husband and wife, Jackson reflected on the challenges they had faced and overcome together. The threats from Bond's creditors had been frightening, but had also proven that their family was strong enough to weather any storm. Tomorrow they would leave for their honeymoon in Ireland, but they would return to a life filled with purpose, love, and the ongoing joy of serving others through their work at the Wellness Center. The millionaire who had almost been killed by poison cake had become a husband, father, and community leader whose greatest wealth was measured in the lives he helped improve. And the best was still yet to come. 6 months after Jackson and Rebecca's wedding, their life had settled into a wonderful rhythm of family happiness and meaningful work. The Wellness Center had opened in September to tremendous community response, serving over 200 families in its first few months of operation. Jackson stood in the center's main lobby on a crisp December morning, watching Rose work with a group of 6-year-olds in the children's reading area. Her tutoring program had expanded to include early childhood literacy, and she was training 3 other retired teachers to help meet the growing demand. "She's remarkable with those children," Rebecca said, joining Jackson near the reception desk. She had just finished her morning medical appointments and was wearing her white coat over a cheerful red sweater. "Look at that little boy in the green shirt," Jackson pointed out. 3 months ago, he couldn't identify letters. Now he's reading simple books. "That's the magic of Rose Wilson," Rebecca smiled. "She makes every child believe they can succeed." At home, Penny had thrived in her new bedroom in the main house, while Rose had moved to a beautifully renovated apartment above the wellness center that allowed her to be close to her work while maintaining her independence. The guest house had been converted into Jackson's home office, where he managed the business side of their community programs. "Jackson," Rebecca said softly, "I have some news I want to share with you." Something in her tone made him look at her more carefully. She was smiling, but there were tears in her eyes. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." Jackson felt his heart stop for a moment, then explode with joy. "Really? Are you sure?" "I'm a doctor, darling. I'm sure." Rebecca laughed, wiping tears from her cheeks. "We're going to have a baby." Jackson swept her into his arms, spinning her around in the lobby while several staff members and families looked on with amusement. "When?" he asked, setting her down gently. "The baby should arrive in August." "Jackson, are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to describe how I feel," he replied, kissing her forehead. "Penny is going to be so excited about being a big sister." That afternoon, they gathered Rose and Penny in the living room at home to share their news. Jackson had stopped by the bakery to pick up Penny's favorite chocolate cupcakes for a little celebration. "We have some special news to share," Rebecca announced, sitting beside Penny on the sofa. Penny looked back and forth between them curiously. "What kind of news?" "You're going to be a big sister," Jackson said with a huge grin. "Rebecca and I are having a baby." Penny's eyes grew wide, and then she jumped up and did a little dance around the coffee table. "Really? A real baby?" "A real baby," Rebecca confirmed. "The baby will be born next summer." Rose wiped tears from her eyes. "Oh, my dears, this is wonderful news. Penny, you're going to be such a good big sister. Can I help take care of the baby?" Penny asked eagerly. "Of course you can," Jackson replied. "This baby is going to be so lucky to have you as a sister." Over the following weeks, as word of Rebecca's pregnancy spread through their community, Jackson marveled at how much their lives had expanded beyond what he could have imagined. They were no longer just a couple running programs at a wellness center. They were building a legacy that would impact their community for generations. The holidays that year were particularly special. Jackson's house was filled with the warmth of family traditions, Rose's homemade cookies, Penny's handmade decorations, and Rebecca's insistence on including community families who might otherwise spend Christmas alone. On Christmas morning, Jackson watched Penny help Rose distribute gifts to the dozen children and adults they had invited to share their celebration. The living room was filled with laughter in multiple languages as families from Somalia, Guatemala, and Vietnam joined their American neighbors in the joy of the season. "This is what Christmas should look like," Rebecca said softly, her hand resting on her barely visible baby bump. "This is what our whole life should look like," Jackson replied. "Full of people we'll love and people we're helping." In February, they learned they were expecting a daughter, and Penny immediately began planning everything from nursery decorations to the baby's first books. Rose started knitting tiny sweaters and blankets, her face glowing with happiness every time she talked about her future great-granddaughter. "What should we name her?" Rebecca asked one evening, as they reviewed the latest expansion plans for the Wellness Center. "I've been thinking about that," Jackson said. "What about Helen Rose Mitchell? Helen for my grandmother who raised me, and Rose for the woman who has become the heart of our family." Rebecca's eyes filled with happy tears. "It's perfect." As spring arrived and Rebecca's pregnancy progressed, Jackson found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. The Wellness Center was now serving over 400 families, with a waiting list for most programs. Rose's tutoring initiative had been so successful that the city was considering funding similar programs in other neighborhoods. But more importantly, they had built something Jackson had never expected to have, a family rooted in love, service, and shared purpose. One evening in late April, Jackson was working in his home office when Penny knocked on the door. "Daddy Jackson, can I ask you something important?" "Always, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Penny sat down in the chair across from his desk, looking unusually serious for a 10-year-old. "When baby Helen is born, will you love her more than you love me?" Jackson felt his heart clench with understanding. Penny had already lost her parents and lived through the fear of losing Rose. Now, with a biological child coming, she was worried about being displaced again. "Penny," Jackson said, coming around the desk to kneel beside her chair, "let me tell you something very important. Love isn't like money or food that gets used up when you share it. Love grows bigger every time you give it to someone new. But she'll be your real daughter. Sweetheart, you are my real daughter. Not because of biology, but because I chose you and you chose me. When baby Helen is born, I'll love her completely, but that won't change how much I love you even a tiny bit." Penny looked at him solemnly. "Promise." "I promise. And Penny, you know what?" "What?" "Baby Helen is going to be so lucky to have you as her big sister. You're going to teach her about courage and kindness and how to stand up for people who need help." Penny smiled for the first time since entering his office. "I'm going to teach her math too. I'm really good at math now." "Yes, you are. You're good at everything you set your mind to." In May, Jackson received an unexpected visitor at the Wellness Center. Martha Stevens, the woman who had poisoned his cake, was waiting in his office when he arrived that morning. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, standing up nervously, "thank you for agreeing to see me." Jackson had been surprised by her request, but curious about what she wanted to say. She looked healthier than she had during the trial, and her eyes held none of the desperation he remembered. "Martha, how are you doing?" "Much better, thanks to the prison education program I participated in. I earned my GED and completed a course in early childhood education." She paused, twisting her hands nervously. "Mr. Mitchell, I know I have no right to ask this, but I heard about the wonderful work you're doing here at the Wellness Center. What can I do for you, Martha?" "I'm looking for a job, and I'd like to work with children. I know my background makes that complicated, but I've learned so much about helping kids learn and grow. I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the terrible thing I tried to do." Jackson studied her face, seeing genuine remorse and determination to make amends. "Martha, I appreciate you coming to me directly. Let me talk to Rose Wilson, who coordinates our educational programs, and Dr. Mitchell, who oversees our community services. If they are comfortable with it, we might be able to find a place for you here." Martha's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Mr. Mitchell, you're giving me a chance I don't deserve." "Martha, everyone deserves a chance to make things right. That's what we're all about here." 2 weeks later, Martha Stevens began working as an assistant in the Wellness Center's Child Care program, helping working parents by providing safe, nurturing care for their young children while they attended medical appointments or job training classes. "How do you feel about Martha working here?" Rebecca asked Jackson one evening as they watched Penny practice piano in the living room. "I feel good about it. Rose says Martha is gentle and patient with the children, and she's genuinely committed to helping families. Besides, if we believe in second chances and redemption, we have to be willing to practice what we preach." As Rebecca's due date approached, Jackson found himself amazed by how much his definition of success had changed. 2 years ago, he had measured achievement by stock prices and profit margins. Now he measured it by the number of families they served, the children who learned to read in Rose's programs, and the knowledge that their work was making a real difference in their community. On a warm evening in early August, Rebecca went into labor. Jackson held her hand through 12 hours of delivery, with Rose and Penny waiting anxiously in the hospital lobby. When baby Helen Rose Mitchell finally arrived, Jackson felt his heart expand in ways he hadn't known were possible. She was perfect, tiny, healthy, with Rebecca's auburn hair and Jackson's blue eyes. "She's beautiful," Rose whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held her new great-granddaughter. "Can I hold my sister?" Penny asked softly, and Jackson carefully placed baby Helen in her arms. "Hi, baby Helen," Penny whispered. "I'm your big sister Penny, and I'm going to take really good care of you." As Jackson looked around the hospital room at his family, his wife, his daughter, his adopted daughter, and the woman who had become his mother figure, he felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought them all together. The millionaire who had almost been killed by poisoned cake had become a man whose greatest wealth was measured in love, family, and service to others. Baby Helen represented not just the continuation of their biological family, but the expansion of their mission to create a community where every child could thrive. Later that night, as Rebecca slept and baby Helen dozed in his arms, Jackson made a silent promise to his newest daughter. He would raise her to understand that true success comes from using your gifts to help others, that family is built through love rather than biology, and that the greatest adventures begin when you open your heart to unexpected blessings. The best chapter of their story was just beginning. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Jackson's Beacon Hill home as the family bustled with excitement and preparation. It was the first week of June, exactly 1 year since Jackson and Rebecca's wedding, and they were planning a very different but equally meaningful celebration. Jackson stood in his kitchen, feeding 10-month-old Helen her breakfast while Rebecca reviewed the guest list for their upcoming ceremony. Not their wedding. That anniversary had passed beautifully last month, but something even more special, Jackson's formal adoption of Penny. "Daddy, can baby Helen come to court with us?" Penny asked, looking up from her own breakfast of pancakes and strawberries. "Of course, sweetheart. This is a family day, and Helen is part of our family." Rose emerged from the dining room, carrying freshly cut flowers from the garden and wearing her best blue dress. At 72, she had never looked healthier or happier, her work at the wellness center giving her endless purpose and joy. "The whole community is excited about today," Rose announced. "Mrs. Chen has prepared enough food for an army, and I think half of South Boston is planning to attend the celebration afterward." The adoption proceedings had taken nearly a year to complete, with social workers, lawyers, and family court judges ensuring that the arrangement was truly in Penny's best interests. But finally, today would make official what had been true in Jackson's heart since that first night he had knelt beside a brave little girl who had saved his life. "Mr. Jackson," Penny said, using the name she still called him in formal moments, "after today, will my last name really be Mitchell?" "That's right, sweetheart. You'll be Penelope Rose Mitchell, officially and legally my daughter. And Helen will really be my sister." "She already is your sister," Rebecca said, bouncing Helen gently on her lap. "Today just makes our family official in the eyes of the law." At 10 o'clock, they arrived at Suffolk County Family Court, where Michael Brown, Jackson's lawyer, met them in the lobby. The courthouse was busy with families navigating various legal proceedings, but Jackson felt only joy and anticipation. Judge Patricia Williams, a kind woman in her 50s with gray hair and warm brown eyes, had been handling adoption cases for over 20 years. She invited the Mitchell family into her chambers, where the proceedings would be informal and family-centered rather than conducted in a formal courtroom. "Good morning, everyone," Judge Williams said, gesturing for them to sit around her conference table. "This is one of my favorite types of hearings because it's all about love and commitment." She reviewed the extensive paperwork documenting Jackson's care for Penny over the past year and a half, Rose's enthusiastic support for the adoption, and the social worker reports showing Penny's happiness and thriving development. "Penny," Judge Williams said, addressing her directly, "do you understand what's happening today?" "Yes. Mr. Jackson is going to be my daddy for real, not just in our hearts." "And how do you feel about that?" "I feel happy and safe and loved," Penny replied without hesitation. Judge Williams smiled warmly. "That's exactly how a child should feel about adoption." She turned to Jackson. "Mr. Mitchell, do you understand the lifelong commitment you're making today?" "Yes, Your Honor. I promise to love, protect, and provide for Penny as my daughter for the rest of my life. She has already blessed my life beyond measure, and I consider myself the luckiest man in Boston to become her legal father." And Mrs. Mitchell, how do you feel about welcoming Penny as your stepdaughter? Penny has been my daughter in every way that matters since the day I met her, Rebecca replied. Today is just making our family bonds official. The judge completed the final paperwork with a flourish, signing the adoption decree with obvious pleasure. Congratulations, Mitchell family. Penny, you are now legally the daughter of Jackson and Rebecca Mitchell. I wish you all a lifetime of happiness together. Penny jumped up from her chair and threw herself into Jackson's arms. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Penny Mitchell. After the ceremony, they drove to the Wellness Center, where Rose had organized a community celebration in honor of the adoption. The main lobby had been decorated with balloons and streamers, and tables were set up with enough food to feed the entire neighborhood. Jackson was amazed to see how many people had come to celebrate with them. There were families from Rose's tutoring programs, Rebecca's medical patients, children from Penny's school, and staff members from the Wellness Center. Even Martha Stevens was there, having become a valued member of their childcare team. Mr. Mitchell, said 8-year-old Carlos, one of Rose's reading students, Penny told us she was getting officially adopted today. That's really cool. Thank you, Carlos. Penny is very excited about it. My mom says you and Dr. Rebecca help lots of families, just like how you helped Penny and Mrs. Rose. Jackson knelt down to Carlos's level. Your mom is right. But you know what the best part is? What? When we help families, we all become a bigger family together. Everyone who comes to the Wellness Center becomes part of our community family. Dr. Rebecca approached, carrying baby Helen and followed by several colleagues from the community health clinic. Jackson, I have some news I want to share with everyone, she announced. The crowd quieted as Rebecca moved to the center of the room. The Wellness Center has been selected to receive a major federal grant for community health and education programs. We're going to be able to expand our services and help even more families in South Boston and beyond. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Jackson felt his throat tighten with emotion as he looked around at the faces of people whose lives had been touched by their work together. Rose stepped forward with a microphone someone had provided for the occasion. I want to say something about this family we're celebrating today, she began, her voice strong and clear. 18 months ago, Penny and I were living in an alley, scared and hungry and hopeless. Then God used my granddaughter's courage to bring us into the life of a man who changed everything for us. She looked at Jackson with tears in her eyes. Jackson Mitchell didn't just give us a place to live. He gave us a family, a purpose, and hope for the future. Today, when he officially becomes Penny's daddy, he's not gaining a daughter, he's acknowledging what has been true from the very beginning. The crowd applauded as Rose handed the microphone to Penny, who looked tiny but confident as she addressed the room full of adults. I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate with us, Penny said, her voice carrying clearly through the lobby. When I was living on the street, I used to wish I could have a family like other kids. Now I have the best family in the world, and we all get to help other families too. She looked directly at Jackson. Daddy Jackson, thank you for listening when I warned you about the poison cake. Thank you for taking care of Grandma Rose and me. And thank you for showing me that good things happen when brave people help each other. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as Jackson took the microphone from his newly official daughter. I don't really know what to say except thank you, he began. Penny, you saved my life that night at the charity gala, but you've saved it in so many other ways since then. You've taught me what it means to be brave, what it means to be generous, and what it means to love unconditionally. He looked around the room at the faces of their extended community family. All of you have shown Rebecca and me that the greatest success in life isn't measured by money or possessions, but by the relationships we build and the lives we touch. The Wellness Center, the tutoring programs, the community celebrations like this one, they're all possible because of the love and support you've given our family. As the afternoon celebration continued, Jackson found himself moving through the crowd, talking with families and marveling at how interconnected their community had become. The Wellness Center wasn't just providing services, it was creating lasting relationships and support networks that strengthened the entire neighborhood. Jackson, Rebecca said, finding him near the children's reading area where several kids were playing with toys while their parents socialized. I have another surprise for you. What now? She handed him an envelope with the official letterhead of Boston University School of Medicine. They've offered me an adjunct professor position, teaching community medicine to medical students. I could train the next generation of doctors to work in underserved communities. Jackson felt a surge of pride in his wife's continued professional growth and community impact. That's wonderful, Rebecca. Are you going to accept? Only if you think it's a good idea. It would mean more time away from home, but it would also mean training doctors who might continue. Retry. OS. Continue. Edit. Plotted story continuation for chapters 9 and 10. The user wants me to continue the story from where I left off. I was in the middle of chapter 9, and Rebecca was talking about the teaching position at Boston University. I need to continue from there, and then complete chapter 10 to finish the 10-chapter story as originally requested. Let me continue from where Rebecca was explaining the teaching position, then move toward the conclusion of chapter 9, and then write chapter 10 to complete the story. The kind of work we're doing here. Rebecca, that's exactly the kind of opportunity that will multiply our impact. You should absolutely accept. That evening, after the community celebration had ended and the wellness center had been cleaned up, the Mitchell family gathered in their living room for a quiet moment together. Jackson sat in his favorite armchair with baby Helen sleeping in his arms, while Rebecca curled up on the sofa with Penny leaning against her shoulder. Rose settled into her chair with her knitting, working on a sweater for Helen's first birthday next month. This has been the most perfect day, Penny said sleepily. Now I'm really and truly a Mitchell. You've been a Mitchell in every way that matters since that first night you came home with us, Jackson replied. Today was just making it official for everyone else. Daddy Jackson, can I ask you something? Always, sweetheart. Do you think my mama and daddy in heaven are happy about you adopting me? Jackson felt his throat tighten with emotion. Even in her happiness, Penny still carried the memory of her both parents and wanted to honor their love. Penny, I think your parents are very happy knowing that you're safe and loved and thriving. They would be so proud of the brave, kind, intelligent young lady you've become. Rose looked up from her knitting. Your mama and daddy loved you very much, sweetheart. They would want nothing more than for you to have a family who loves you just as much as they did. And now baby Helen gets to grow up with all of us from the very beginning, Penny observed. She's so lucky. Rebecca smiled, stroking Penny's hair. Helen is lucky, but so are we. We get to watch her grow up in a house full of love, surrounded by people who care about helping others. Later that night, after Penny and Helen were both asleep, Jackson and Rebecca sat on their back porch enjoying the warm June evening and reflecting on the day's events. Jackson, do you ever think about what your life would have been like if Penny hadn't warned you about the poison cake? Jackson considered the question seriously. I probably would have died that night. But even if I had survived, I think I would have continued living the same empty, isolated life I had before. I might have gotten richer, but I never would have gotten happier. And now I wake up every morning grateful for the chance to love you and the girls, to work alongside Rose at the Wellness Center, and to be part of this incredible community we've built together. Rebecca took his hand. Jackson, I want you to know how proud I am of the man you've become. Not the successful businessman. I mean the father, husband, and community leader who puts love and service ahead of profit. Rebecca, I couldn't be any of those things without you beside me. You've shown me what it means to dedicate your life to healing and helping others. As they prepared to go inside, Jackson took one last look around his back garden, remembering how empty and formal it had seemed just 2 years ago. Now it was filled with. Jackson, Rebecca said, finding him near the children's reading area where several kids were playing with toys while their parents socialized. I have another surprise for you. What now? She handed him an envelope with the official letterhead of Boston University School of Medicine. They've offered me an adjunct professor position, teaching community medicine to medical students. I could train the next generation of doctors to work in underserved communities. Jackson felt a surge of pride in his wife's continued professional growth and community impact. That's wonderful, Rebecca. Are you going to accept? Only if you think it's a good idea. It would mean more time away from home, but it would also mean training doctors who might continue. Retry. OS. Continue. Edit. Plotted story continuation for chapters 9 and 10. The user wants me to continue the story from where I left off. I was in the middle of chapter 9, and Rebecca was talking about the teaching position at Boston University. I need to continue from there and then complete chapter 10 to finish the 10-chapter story as originally requested. Let me continue from where Rebecca was explaining the teaching position, then move toward the conclusion of chapter 9, and then write chapter 10 to complete the story. The kind of work we're doing here. Rebecca, that's exactly the kind of opportunity that will multiply our impact. You should absolutely accept. That evening, after the community celebration had ended and the wellness center had been cleaned up, the Mitchell family gathered in their living room for a quiet moment together. Jackson sat in his favorite armchair with baby Helen sleeping in his arms, while Rebecca curled up on the sofa with Penny leaning against her shoulder. Rose settled into her chair with her knitting, working on a sweater for Helen's first birthday next month. "This has been the most perfect day," Penny said sleepily. "Now I'm really and truly a Mitchell." "You've been a Mitchell in every way that matters since that first night you came home with us," Jackson replied. "Today was just making it official for everyone else." "Daddy Jackson, can I ask you something?" "Always, sweetheart." "Do you think my mama and daddy in heaven are happy about you adopting me?" Jackson felt his throat tighten with emotion. Even in her happiness, Penny still carried the memory of her both parents and wanted to honor their love. "Penny, I think your parents are very happy knowing that you're safe and loved and thriving. They would be so proud of the brave, kind, intelligent young lady you've become." Rose looked up from her knitting. "Your mama and daddy loved you very much, sweetheart. They would want nothing more than for you to have a family who loves you just as much as they did." "And now baby Helen gets to grow up with all of us from the very beginning," Penny observed. "She's so lucky." Rebecca smiled, stroking Penny's hair. "Helen is lucky, but so are we. We get to watch her grow up in a house full of love, surrounded by people who care about helping others." Later that night, after Penny and Helen were both asleep, Jackson and Rebecca sat on their back porch enjoying the warm June evening and reflecting on the day's events. "Jackson, do you ever think about what your life would have been like if Penny hadn't warned you about the poison cake?" Jackson considered the question seriously. "I probably would have died that night. But even if I had survived, I think I would have continued living the same empty, isolated life I had before. I might have gotten richer, but I never would have gotten happier. And now I wake up every morning grateful for the chance to love you and the girls, to work alongside Rose at the Wellness Center, and to be part of this incredible community we've built together." Rebecca took his hand. "Jackson, I want you to know how proud I am of the man you've become. Not the successful businessman. I mean the father, husband, and community leader who puts love and service ahead of profit. Rebecca, I couldn't be any of those things without you beside me. You've shown me what it means to dedicate your life to healing and helping others." As they prepared to go inside, Jackson took one last look around his back garden, remembering how empty and formal it had seemed just 2 years ago. Now it was filled with the evidence of family life: Penny's bicycle, Helen's stroller, Rose's vegetable garden, and the swing set Jackson had installed near the apple tree. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities at the Wellness Center, more families to serve, and more ways to make a difference in their community. But tonight, Jackson was simply grateful for the unexpected journey that had brought him the greatest wealth he could imagine: a family built on love, courage, and the simple act of one person helping another. 1 year later, on a brilliant September morning, Jackson stood in the main lobby of the newly expanded Wellness Center, watching the controlled chaos of opening day for their latest initiative, a comprehensive job training and placement program designed to help unemployed adults gain marketable skills. The center had grown dramatically over the past year, now occupying an entire city block with medical facilities, educational programs, childcare services, and vocational training workshops. Rose's tutoring programs had been so successful that the state of Massachusetts was using their model to develop similar programs throughout New England. "Dad, look what I made in art class," 11-year-old Penny called, running across the lobby with a colorful painting in her hands. Jackson knelt down to examine her artwork, a beautiful family portrait showing him, Rebecca, Rose, Penny, and 1-year-old Helen standing in front of the Wellness Center. This is incredible, sweetheart. You've really captured everyone perfectly. Mrs. Anderson says I might want to think about art classes when I get to high school. But I still love math the most. Rebecca approached from the medical wing, wearing her white coat and carrying Helen, who had just finished a checkup with the pediatrician. How are our students doing on their first day? Rebecca asked, nodding toward the group of 20 adults who were beginning their 8-week program in computer skills, healthcare support, and small business development. Nervous but excited, Jackson replied. Maria Santos from the restaurant down the street is taking the small business course, and she's already talking about opening her own catering company. That's wonderful. The community partnerships you've developed are really making a difference. Jackson had spent the past year building relationships with local employers who committed to hiring graduates from the Wellness Center's training programs. The success rate had been remarkable. Over 80% of participants had found steady employment within 3 months of completing their courses. Rose emerged from the children's area, where she had been reading to a group of preschoolers while their parents attended job training sessions. Jackson, we have a problem, she announced with a smile that suggested it was a good kind of problem. What's that, Rose? We have a waiting list of over 100 families who want to enroll their children in our after-school and summer programs. We're going to need more space and more staff. Jackson felt the familiar thrill of challenge and opportunity. Each success at the Wellness Center seemed to reveal new ways they could serve their community. Then I guess it's time to start planning the next expansion. That afternoon, Jackson received a call that would change their family's trajectory once again. It was Judge Patricia Williams, who had handled Penny's adoption the previous year. Mr. Mitchell, I have an unusual request. There's a situation involving 3 siblings, ages 6, 8, and 10, whose parents died in a car accident. They have no extended family able to care for them, and they are currently in temporary foster care. Jackson felt his heart rate increase. What can I do to help, Your Honor? These children have heard about your family and specifically requested to meet you. The oldest child, a 10-year-old boy named David, somehow learned about Penny's story and how you adopted her. He wants to know if you might consider taking in him and his younger sisters. Jackson sat quietly for a moment, thinking about their family's capacity to welcome 3 more children. Helen was still very young, Penny was thriving in middle school, and their work at the Wellness Center demanded significant time and energy. But he also thought about his own childhood, when his grandmother Helen had opened her heart and home to him after his parents died. He thought about the night Penny had warned him about poison cake, and how that act of courage had led to the greatest blessings of his life. Judge Williams, when can we meet these children? That evening, Jackson gathered his family in their living room to discuss the possibility of expanding their household once again. Rebecca sat cross-legged on the floor, helping Helen stack colorful blocks, while Penny worked on homework at the coffee table and Rose knitted in her favorite chair. I received an interesting phone call today, Jackson began, and explained Judge Williams' request. Penny looked up from her math problems immediately. 3 kids who don't have parents. That's right, sweetheart. They are in foster care right now, but they need a permanent family. Are we going to adopt them? Penny asked, her voice full of hope and excitement. Rebecca and Jackson exchanged glances. They had talked briefly about the possibility of having more children, but this would be a much bigger change than they had imagined. We need to think about it as a family, Rebecca said carefully. 3 more children would mean a much bigger household, more bedrooms needed, more schedules to coordinate. Rose set down her knitting. If I may offer my opinion, I think we should at least meet these children. Sometimes God puts people in our path for reasons we don't immediately understand. Just like how Penny came into our lives, Jackson agreed. Rose, how do you feel about the possibility of 3 more grandchildren? Honey, my heart has room for as much love as this family wants to give. If these children need us, then we should be there for them. The next day, Jackson, Rebecca, and Penny drove to the Department of Children and Families office to meet David, Sophia, and Emma Chen. The children were waiting in a conference room with their social worker, looking nervous but hopeful. David was indeed 10 years old, with serious dark eyes and the protective posture of a child who had taken responsibility for his younger sisters. Sophia, age 8, had long black hair and stayed close to David's side, while 6-year-old Emma clutched a worn stuffed elephant and watched the adults with wary curiosity. "David, these are the people you wanted to meet," their social worker, Mrs. Patterson, explained gently. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, and their daughter Penny." David looked directly at Jackson. "Are you the man who adopted Penny after she saved you from poison?" "That's right," Jackson replied, impressed by the boy's directness. "Penny warned me that someone had put something dangerous in my food, and that act of courage led to our becoming a family." "Penny," David said, turning to her, "were you scared when you were living on the streets?" Penny sat down in a chair across from the 3 siblings, her expression serious and understanding. "I was scared sometimes, especially about my Grandma Rose getting sick. But I wasn't scared when I warned Mr. Jackson about the cake, because I knew it was the right thing to do." "That's how I feel about taking care of Sophia and Emma," David said. "Sometimes I'm scared, but I know I have to protect them." Jackson felt his heart clench with recognition. This 10-year-old boy was carrying the same burden of responsibility that Jackson had carried after his parents' death, the same fierce protectiveness that Rose had shown for Penny. "David, can I ask you something?" "Yes, sir." "If you came to live with our family, you wouldn't have to be the only one protecting Sophia and Emma anymore. We would all take care of each other, just like we do now." For the first time since they had entered the room, David's serious expression softened slightly. "Really? You would help me take care of my sisters?" "David, if you came to live with us, Sophia and Emma would become my daughters, and you would become my son. That means I would be responsible for protecting all of you, and you could just be a kid again." Sophia spoke for the first time, her voice barely above a whisper. "Would we all get to stay together?" Rebecca leaned forward in her chair. "Absolutely, sweetheart. We would never separate siblings. You're a family, and families belong together." Emma, the youngest, looked up at Penny. "Do you like having a daddy and mommy?" "I love it," Penny replied without hesitation. "Daddy Jackson and Mommy Rebecca make me feel safe and happy every day. And I have the best grandma in the world, and a baby sister who's learning to walk." "A baby sister." Emma's eyes lit up with interest. Over the next hour, they talked about school, favorite foods, hobbies, and dreams for the future. David wanted to be an engineer, Sophia loved to draw, and Emma was fascinated by animals and wanted to become a veterinarian. As the meeting concluded, David asked to speak privately with Jackson. "Mr. Mitchell, can I ask you why you would want to adopt 3 more kids when you already have Penny and baby Helen?" Jackson considered the question carefully, remembering his own need for honest answers when he was David's age. "David, when Penny came into my life, she taught me that the best things happen when people help each other. My family has been blessed with resources and love that we can share. If we can give you and your sisters a safe, loving home, then that's what we should do. But won't it be expensive and complicated?" Jackson smiled at the boy's practical concerns. "David, money and complications are just problems to solve. Love and family are the things that really matter. Besides, I think you and your sisters would make our family even better and stronger." David nodded solemnly. "I would like to try living with your family, if Sophia and Emma want to also." The adoption process for David, Sophia, and Emma took 6 months to complete, during which they spent weekends and holidays with the Mitchell family, gradually adjusting to their new living situation. Jackson and Rebecca renovated the entire 3rd floor of their house to create bedrooms for the older children, while baby Helen moved into a nursery next to their master bedroom. The wellness center continued to thrive and expand, with Rose now managing educational programs for over 300 children and adults. Rebecca had been promoted to Director of Community Medicine at Boston General while maintaining her teaching responsibilities, and Jackson had been invited to speak at conferences about innovative approaches to comprehensive community development. But the greatest changes were happening at home, where their family of 3 had become a family of 7. Penny had embraced a role as big sister to everyone, helping David with advanced mathematics while teaching Sophia and Emma about courage and kindness. Rose had seamlessly welcomed 3 more grandchildren into her loving care, and even baby Helen seemed to thrive with more siblings to entertain her. On Christmas morning, 2.5 years after Penny had first warned Jackson about poison cake, the Mitchell family gathered in their living room to exchange gifts and celebrate their incredible journey together. Jackson sat in his armchair, holding 2-year-old Helen, while watching his other children open presents around the Christmas tree. David was helping Emma read the tag on her gift. Sophia was showing Penny a drawing she had made for Rose, and the room was filled with the joyful chaos of a large, loving family. "Jackson," Rebecca said, settling beside his chair with her coffee, "do you remember what you told me about measuring success?" "I said I used to measure it by profit margins and stock prices." "And now?" Jackson looked around the room at his remarkable family. His wife whose dedication to healing had transformed their community, his mother figure whose wisdom guided them all, his brave daughter who had saved his life and continued to inspire others, his 3 newest children who were learning to trust and hope again, and his youngest daughter who would grow up surrounded by love and purpose. "Now I measure success by moments like this," he replied. "By David's laugh when Penny helps him with a math problem, by Sophia's excitement when she shows us her artwork, by Emma's questions about every animal she sees, by Helen's first words, and by the knowledge that our family is making a real difference in the world." Rose looked up from helping Sophia untangle the ribbon on a particularly complex package. "You know what I'm most grateful for," she said, her voice carrying the weight of all their shared experiences. "What's that, Rose?" "I'm grateful that when my granddaughter saw something wrong that night at the charity gala, she had the courage to speak up. That one act of bravery led to all of this, our family, the wellness center, the hundreds of families we've helped, and the love that fills this house every single day." Jackson nodded, thinking about the mysterious ways that tragedy and blessing could interweave in a single life. The poisoning attempt that nearly killed him had instead opened his heart to the greatest adventure he could imagine. "What I've learned," Jackson said, pulling Rebecca closer and watching their children play together, "is that the best investments aren't in stocks or real estate. They are in people, in giving someone a chance, in building community, in choosing love over fear." Later that afternoon, as the family prepared for their traditional Christmas dinner with extended community members who might otherwise spend the holiday alone, Jackson received a phone call from an unexpected source. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Father Martinez from St. Catherine's Church in South Boston. I hope I'm not interrupting your Christmas celebration." "Not at all, Father. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling because we have a situation I thought you might want to know about. There's a homeless veteran named Robert Thompson who's been staying in our church basement. He's been asking about the family who runs the wellness center, specifically about the little girl who saved someone's life and how that led to them helping other people." Jackson felt the familiar stirring of recognition and purpose. "What does Mr. Thompson need, Father?" "He needs medical care, job training, and housing. But more than that, he needs hope. He's heard your family's story, and he wants to believe that good things can still happen to people who've lost everything. Bring him to the Wellness Center tomorrow morning, Father. We'll take care of him." As Jackson hung up the phone, he realized that their story was far from over. There would always be more people to help, more families to save, more opportunities to demonstrate that love and generosity could transform lives and communities. Rebecca appeared at his side, having overheard the conversation. "Another person who needs help. Another chance to make a difference," Jackson replied, kissing her forehead. That evening, as their extended family and community friends gathered around tables laden with Rose's incredible cooking, Jackson stood to offer the blessing he gave every year. "We're grateful for the unexpected ways that God brings people together, for the courage to help when help is needed, and for the love that grows stronger every time we share it. We're thankful for second chances, for redemption, for community, and for the knowledge that our greatest wealth is measured not in what we have, but in what we give away." As everyone joined hands around the tables, Jackson looked at the faces of people whose lives had been touched by their work, former students from Rose's programs who were now successful in careers and education, families who had received medical care and support during difficult times, children who had learned to read and dream of bright futures. The millionaire who had almost died from poison cake had become something far more valuable, a man whose life was dedicated to love, service, and the radical belief that every person deserved dignity, opportunity, and hope. Outside, snow began to fall on the streets of Boston, covering the city in pristine white. Inside Jackson Mitchell's home, 3 generations of a chosen family celebrated the miracle of love that had transformed them all, while planning tomorrow's work of continuing to transform their community. The greatest adventure of Jackson's life had begun with a warning about poison, and had become a story of healing, hope, and the incredible things that happen when people choose courage over fear and love over indifference. And the story continued every single day, with every person helped, every child educated, every family given a second chance at happiness and success. This was Jackson Mitchell's true legacy, not the millions in his bank account, but the lives changed and the love multiplied through the simple act of one person helping another. The end was really just the beginning of countless new stories of hope and transformation yet to be written.